Hello, everybody. Welcome to this discussion hosted by Family Councils Ontario with our special guest, Donald Carty. My name is Taeyang Jang. I am the bilingual events manager at FCO, and it is a pleasure to have Donald with us today for this session where dignity leads, belonging follows. I would like to take a moment to recognize that I'm currently joining from Toronto, which is seated on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and it is an honor to be able to work and to connect on this land. And we hope to continue doing our work with diligence and respect to the people who were here before us. Donald Carty is a transformative community leader whose life's work has been to make systems more human. Rooted in the lived experience of caregiving for his mother, father, and brother, and shaped by decades of civic engagement, he has become a trusted voice in healthcare, long-term care, and equity work across Canada. His leadership, spanning roles such as co-chair of the Barrie and Area Ontario Health Team, co-chair of Barrie's Anti-Racism Task Force, and National Health Fellow at McMaster University, has consistently centered dignity, compassion, and the fundamental human need to belong. Donald is known for creating spaces where people feel safe to speak, where marginalized voices are heard, and where communities and decision makers can meet with honesty and respect. His work is grounded in emotional intelligence, ancestral wisdom, and a deep commitment to justice. Whether moderating national dialogues, advocating for caregivers, supporting families in long-term care, or challenging institutions to confront inequity, Donald brings a rare combination of gentleness and courage. He bridges divides, holds space for grief and possibility, and invites people into conversations that heal as much as they transform. Through every role, he has cultivated the conditions where belonging can take root, reminding us that systems change not only through policy, but through presence, humanity, and the willingness to see one another fully.
Um, it's truly a privilege to be here with you today, especially during Black History Month. This month provides us with the opportunity to reflect on the contributions, struggles, and resilience of Black Canadians, as well as to recognize the ways in which Black Canadians have shaped the country we live in today. But Black History Month is not only a time to reflect on the larger history of Black people, it's also an opportunity to reflect on personal stories. And today, I want to share with you a part of my own family's history, stories of survival, courage, sacrifice, and service. These are not just my family's stories, they are stories that speak to the broader themes of perseverance and resistance in the face of adversity. Let me begin with my mother, Viola McQueen's side of the family, a side rooted in the painful history of the transatlantic slave trade, um, which ended in 1865 in the US and here in Canada in 1834. This is a history that is not just personal, but shared by many in the Black community. My maternal ancestors, like so many others, were forced into slavery through the transatlantic slave trade. We were stolen from Nigeria and landed in Virginia. From there, we were scattered through Alabama and Mississippi, eventually arriving in a place called Muskogee, Florida. My grandparents, Mattie Lee, who was born in 1887, and Elias, my grandfather, in 1879. Their parents were born into slavery. Growing up under the Jim Crow laws of the United States in the South, my mother and her family faced systemic oppression and discrimination. Yet they also instilled in me the importance of spirituality, community, and justice. The church was a central force in their lives, and even to this day, our family is our leaders in several churches in the South. My grandmother, Mattie Lee Williams, was a maid, a midwife, and a pillar of strength and compassion in the community, embodying leadership and empowerment, who refused to let the oppressive system break her spirit. And in Muskogee, Florida, we are honored with a street named after us now called McQueen Street. This is a lasting tribute to our roots, to the sacrifices made, and the legacy of resilience that continues through our family. Despite the brutality of the era, my family held tight to its values, justice, and community. This legacy of perseverance continues to inspire me as I carry forward their lessons of duty, sacrifice, and fighting for racial justice for all that was sacrificed and for generations to come. While my mother Viola's side of the family carries this history of survival, my father's side offers a different yet equally powerful story. My grandfather, Albert Carty, came from a small island in St. Martin in the Dutch West Indies and was orphaned at a young age. Albert's life was defined by resilience. As a sailor, he traveled the world and eventually made his way to St. John, New Brunswick, a land full of hope, but also full of the challenges for someone like him. One day, a fellow sailor encouraged him to take a shore leave, and that is when he met my grandmother, Fanny Delia Tyler. My grandmother, whose journey in Canada would begin the next chapter of our family's story. Despite his ambition and skill, Albert faced racial prejudice in Canada, even his position as a ship pilot. But his resilience never wavered, and that resilience, that strength, has been passed down to me and continues to shape how I navigate life today. Building a life in Canada was not easy, especially for Black immigrants. But my family's story of strength extends beyond just making a living. It's also about serving this country, even when our contributions were not always fully recognized. The legacy of military service in our family is a proud one. During World War I, my great uncle Seymour Tyler and my grandfather Albert Carty both enlisted in the number 2 construction battalion, the first and only all-Black battalion in Canadian military history. And just a few years ago, we were honored, and they were finally honored in a grand way in Toronto. They did a full-page story on the battalion. This battalion was formed due to racial prejudice and kept Black soldiers from being able to serve in regular regiments. Seymour was wounded during the Battle of Camel Hill in France in 1917, where he earned both the British War Medal and the Victoria Medal, awarded for exceptional bravery and courage in combat. Seymour's bravery was a testament to the spirit of Black Canadians during a time when their service was often not fully recognized. Seymour, when reflecting on his experience, famously said, "No man is any braver than a Black man." His words speak to the courage, dignity, and commitment shown by Black soldiers who, even when they were not afforded full recognition, fought for the values of freedom and justice. The legacy of Seymour, Albert, and their comrades is a lasting one. They are a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even when the world does not see us or honor our service, we must still continue to serve and push for justice. And that spirit of service carried forward into World War II with my uncles. Before we dive into the role of Black Canadians during World War II, it's important to first understand the difficult context they faced. My grandparents, Fanny Delia and Albert, raised 11 children, but tragically lost 4 of them before the Great Depression hit full force. Like many Black families, they experienced the severe economic hardships of the 30s, especially in places like New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, where the Depression's toll was even harsher due to racial inequality. Black Canadians, already marginalized, faced even greater struggles during the economic downturn. They were often the first to be laid off and the last to be hired. Discrimination kept them out of many relief programs, leaving them to fend for themselves. Despite these harsh realities, Black communities, especially in St. John, New Brunswick, demonstrated incredible resilience. With limited resources, they turned to each other for support. Churches, community groups, and mutual aid networks became lifelines that helped families survive. It was this sense of solidarity and unity forged in adversity that would later empower them to rise up during the war. The economic situation was grim across New Brunswick, but it hit Black Canadians particularly hard. While entire industries like fishing, logging, and agriculture crumbled, Black workers in these sectors were often left without support. Governments were slow to act, and relief programs were inadequate. It wasn't until World War II sparked industrial growth that the province began to recover. In the southern U.S., my grandparents, Mattie Lee and Elias, in Muskogee, Florida, had 11 children as well, with 5 lost before the Depression's full impact and faced their own struggles. The Jim Crow laws, segregation, and widespread discrimination meant that Black people had limited access to quality education, healthcare, and other essential services. Even as the New Deal brought relief to many, Black people often faced obstacles when trying to access those benefits. Sharecroppers already worked under exploitive conditions. As crop prices fell, their situation worsened. Economic hardship was compounded by racial segregation and exclusion from relief programs, which kept Black families from receiving help. But again, community resilience prevailed. Black families in Muskogee relied on mutual support, leaning on churches and extended family to get through the rough times. What stands out about these experiences, both in Canada and the US, is how Black communities, despite being deeply impacted by economic collapse and racial discrimination, found ways to survive. They came together, strengthened by their unity and their ability to support each other through the dark times. In the end, the Great Depression didn't break these communities. Instead, it laid the foundation for their extraordinary contributions in World War II. The courage, perseverance, and sense of duty that Black Canadians demonstrated in the face of such hardship became a defining characteristic of their legacy, one that would shine brightly as they served their country with honor and distinction in the years to come. During World War II, my uncles continued the family's military tradition. Seymour decided that he was going to re-enlist in the Second World War, and his nephew, my uncle Gerald, became Canada's youngest Air Force officer. When his commanding officer had called him to his office, he said that some people in Ottawa were wondering if it was the right thing to promote you to an officer as a pilot. Even though he had tops in his class, and I can't remember the other word right now, but he was tops in his class, and his comrades or the other people in his unit wanted him to take up this place. So he became the youngest officer in the Canadian Air Force. It wasn't called that then; it was more like the RAF. My uncle Jerry again flew over 30 missions over occupied Europe and was shot down. As being the radio operator at that particular moment, he had to stay aboard the airplane so he could read out all the coordinates that were necessary to pick up those that had bailed out. So he went down with the ship, but was quickly rushed away by the French resistance and became a remarkable tale of survival. After the war, though, Gerald faced racial discrimination. When seeking employment, despite his qualifications, his application to TransCanada Airlines, which is now called Air Canada, was dismissed after they received his photograph. Another uncle, Uncle Don, my namesake, also faced significant racism during the military service and in his everyday life. Even when he found housing for his family, this is after the war, his neighbors petitioned that they wanted him and his family to leave, showing the harshness of the prejudice that followed Black families, even after they sacrificed so much for their country. Yet despite these obstacles, my uncles and their service in the military continue to inspire me. They remind me that despite the challenges, there's always value in standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. Another of my uncles, Adolphus, was ordained in the Church of England and became rector in Benton Harbor, West Michigan. Alongside their military service, my great uncle Seymour and my uncle Clyde also worked as sleeping car porters for the Canadian Pacific Railway from 1941 to 1970. Black porters portrayed a vital role in the functioning of the railway system, but their work was not without struggle. They faced harsh working conditions, discrimination, and racial prejudice, yet they did not remain silent. These men were some of the first to organize for better working conditions, for dignity, and for fair wages. Their activism laid the groundwork for future generations of Black labor leaders and activists in Canada. And their struggle for justice continues to inspire me in my own work, and I try to build on that foundation to fight for fairness and equity in all sectors of life. In the early 1950s, my mom, Viola, met my dad, Robert, a Canadian Armed Forces soldier, through a singles magazine or a newspaper. They began writing, and eventually there would be phone calls and telegrams. In 1951, my dad visited my mom in Muskogee under the watchful eye of her mother, Maddie Lee. They fell in love and married in Pensacola, Florida. Soon after, my mom embarked on a journey north to Canada, leaving behind the oppressive Jim Crow laws of the South. In 1961, my sister and I accompanied our mother by train from Muskogee to visit family. The journey was long and a long way. I saw the effects of segregation firsthand. When we had to move, once we got to a particular line, we had to move from the car we were in to what was called the colored car. Black people could not mix with white people once they got to that line. I saw we couldn't sit on certain benches. We couldn't drink from certain fountains. We couldn't even swim in the ocean. It was a curious experience. Once in Muskogee, I was welcomed by my uncles, aunts, and cousins who worked the farm with pride. They were sharecroppers, by the way, earlier than that. My grandmother, a strong and independent woman, ran the farm with support from family. Despite the hard work, there was a deep sense of unity. I also experienced moments of discipline. I was there shortly after when they beat up this young man named Emmett Till, who came down from Chicago because he said something nice to this woman. He was beaten to death. Like my grandfather, Maddie Lee sent me to fetch a switch down there. It's really just a tiny branch that you cut off because I needed to be punished because I was out of her sight for just a few moments. But through it all, I understood the importance of family and discipline. One of my more memorable moments on the way home was singing on the train, and the song that my grandmother liked and my mother liked, and also my little sister at the time, was "Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen" for the passengers on the train. So the conductor asked my mother if he could take me up and down the train. So he took me. I was only 6 years old, probably 3 foot nothing, if that. And he took me by the hand, and mom and my little sister followed behind. And I sang that and did a little shuffle, and people were throwing money at me. It was a lot of fun, actually. And and for the first time at that moment, I felt like I had a place in the world. The attention was overwhelming. People were laughing, and it was a feeling I would carry with me forever. The legacy of service and advocacy runs deep in my family, and it has continued through my parents as well. My father, Robert, served as a Canadian soldier and was in the United Nations peacekeeping forces and overseas a lot. While my mother, Viola, would raise 6 children basically in his absence and on her own. This is one memory that stands out for me during this period, when a neighbor used a racial slur against my brother. My mother, though not tall, she was probably 5 foot, if that, and 94 soaking wet, 94 pounds. She marched over to the house with quiet but powerful determination and demanded respect for her children. That moment of courage, of standing up for what's right, was a powerful lesson that my mother instilled in me. It's a lesson that shapes my work today in community media, and my advocacy for racial justice and equality. I've dedicated myself to building spaces where dialogue and understanding can take place, spaces where people of all races and backgrounds can come together as my family had done for generations. As I share my family's journey, I'm reminded that this story is not just about one family. It's about the broader global Black experience. Black people around the world are incredibly diverse, with rich cultural, ethnic, linguistic, and religious variations. From the Yoruba and Zulu peoples in Africa to the diasporic communities across the Caribbean, Latin America, North America, we carry with us legacies of resilience, creativity, and strength. In the face of colonialism, slavery, and systemic oppression, we have built communities that thrive. We've contributed to music, literature, art, politics, and culture in ways that have shaped the world. From jazz to hip hop, Afrobeat to reggae, Black communities have created movements that continue to influence society. And through it all, we carry forward the strength and wisdom of our ancestors. For over half a century, I have worked tirelessly to carry forward the values of resilience, justice, and community that were instilled in me by my ancestors. These principles have been the cornerstone of my own advocacy and volunteer efforts as I've dedicated my life to building bridges across communities and fighting for racial justice. Through my work in community media, including hosting the Harmony at Home TV show, I have created spaces where individuals from all walks of life can come together, engage in meaningful conversations, and promote understanding. Additionally, I've moderated anti-racism workshops using dialogue as a tool to break down barriers and foster inclusion. As a moderator for the Citizens Forum on Canada's Future, I led many dialogues on the future Canadians wanted for the country. And as a member of the National Black Coalition of Canada and Contrast newspaper in Toronto. I've also had the honor of serving on the very first Mayor's Committee on Community and Race Relations in Toronto, where I worked to address the pressing issues of racism and inequality within the city. My time with the Broward County Human Rights Labor Race Relations in South Florida furthered my commitment to equality as I facilitated discussions that advanced understanding of racism and its impact, particularly on college campuses. These experiences deepened my understanding of the importance of dialogue as a vehicle for change. As a National Health Fellow and policy advocate, I continue my family's legacy by championing policies that aim to create equality in healthcare and beyond. One such policy initiative I'm particularly proud of is Ontario's long-term fixing long-term care act in 2021, which seeks to address the systemic challenges in long-term care and improve services for vulnerable populations, and as co-chair of the Barrie area Ontario Health Team. Additionally, I was involved in the first anti-racism task force where I live now in Barrie, Ontario, where I worked alongside other advocates to push for a more just and equitable future for Black Canadians and all racial minorities. Through this work, I've been able to ensure that the spirit of resilience and service passed down from my ancestors continue to inspire the fight for social justice in Canada. Black history is a global story, one that transcends borders and generations, from Africa's freedom movements to the cultural political impact of Black communities across the Caribbean, the Americas, and beyond. The contributions are vast and profound. It is crucial to recognize that the Black experience is not confined to one place or one time. It is an interconnected legacy of resilience, survival, and strength. Black history is rich with leaders who have inspired millions of worldwide through fight for justice, equality, and self-determination. Figures like Nelson Mandela, who spent decades fighting apartheid in South Africa, and Shirley Chisholm, the first Black woman elected to the U.S. Congress, have etched their names into the history of global activism. The work of Wangari Maathai, the Kenyan environmentalist and Nobel Peace Prize laureate, shows how Black leaders have made invaluable contributions not only to their countries, but to the world. Let us not forget the Caribbean, where many Black Canadians trace their roots. One of the most influential figures in this regard is Marcus Garvey, a Jamaican leader whose ideas about Black empowerment and unity continued to shape movements worldwide. Similarly, African leaders such as Kwame Nkrumah and Jomo Kenyatta, who fought against colonial rule, continue to influence Africa's position in the global community today. In Toronto, we see Black Canadians make powerful contributions about all fields. Oscar Peterson was one of the greatest jazz pianists in history, represents the fusion of culture and excellence that many Black Canadians contribute to the arts. Athletes like Andre DeGrassi embody the power of persistence, showcasing that greatness can be achieved against all odds. These stories of success and the achievement highlight the ongoing influence of Black Canadians. Africa, a continent of 54 countries and of unparalleled diversity, is home to over 3,000 ethnic groups and more than 2,000 languages, from the Yoruba, Igbo, and Hassai in West Africa to the Zulu, Xhosa, and Shona in Southern Africa. This is an incredible variety has shaped the continent's history and continues to influence its future. This diversity can also be seen in the religions practiced. Christianity, Islam, and indigenous African beliefs all play major roles in African societies. The transatlantic slave trade, lasting more than 400 years, was a dark chapter that shaped the global Black experience. Millions of African people were forcibly removed from their homelands, separating families and erasing identities. Yet, out of this tragedy, a resilient diaspora emerged. Black people carried with them their cultures, music, languages, and traditions, influencing societies from the Americas to Europe. As African nations fought for independence, the migration of African people continued to shape the diaspora. Canada became a destination for Black individuals seeking better opportunities or fleeing oppression. Many arrived through the Underground Railroad, while others were Black loyalists who sought refuge after fighting for the British during the American Revolution. Yet, even in Canada, discrimination persisted. Black Canadians were often confined to low-paying jobs, segregated housing, and limited access to education. Despite these challenges today, Canada is home to a diverse population of Black Canadians. Their stories are ones of survival, perseverance, and adaptation, creating a unique and important chapter in Canada's history. As we reflect on this history and contributions of Black people worldwide, we recognize that Black history is not just part of the past, it is a living, breathing legacy from the ancient civilizations of Africa to the fight against slavery. From the struggle for independence to the challenges of migration, the story of Black people is one of unyielding resilience and strength. This Black History Month, let us honor and continue to celebrate the achievements, the sacrifices, and the ongoing journey of Black people in Canada, the Americas, and across the world. As we reflect on my family's history and the history of Black people worldwide, I want to leave you with this. The resilience, the courage, the fight for justice that we see in our history is something that we all carry with us today. We must continue to build on the legacy of those who came before us, whether through service, advocacy, or simply showing kindness and respect for others. We all have a role to play in creating a more just and inclusive world. Even as my ancestors carried their stories from their indigenous lands on the African continent and the American South, from the islands, and from the long shadow of slave trade, I grew up in Canada, a Canada that was still deciding what to call someone like me. In the 1930s and 40s, people of African descent were labeled Negro or colored. By the time I was born in 1956, Those words were still echoing in the classrooms, workplaces, and neighborhoods. Later came Black Canadian, Afro Canadian, Caribbean Canadian, each one arriving like a new attempt to place me somewhere. But with every new label, I felt the same quiet message that I was being named, but not always welcomed, identified, but not also always included. Yet my ancestors did not cross oceans, borders, and generations for me to shrink myself to fit someone else's vocabulary. Their journey taught me that belonging is not something granted by a label. It is something carried in the body, claimed in the spirit, and lived out loud. I stand here today because they insisted on their humanity, and I insist on mine. And even when the world used words that lifted me up and other words that tried to diminish me, my grandmother's voice cut through all of it. She looked at me with a certainty the world had not yet learned to offer and said to me, "You are the one." In that moment, she gave me a belonging no label could ever take away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donald, for sharing your story with us. I would like to invite Tiffany Fionn from Family Councils Ontario. She's our Director of Policy.
Thank you so much, Taeyong and Donald. Thank you for that presentation. There were times where I was teary-eyed. There were times where I could relate to my own experience being an immigrant from Jamaica and seeing my family come here and go through different experiences. So the strength and the courage to share all of that, it means a lot to me, and I'm sure it does to our audience. So thank you so much for being with us today. I did want to really lean on, the honesty and wisdom that you shared, and just kind of dive into a couple questions so that our viewers can reflect a little bit more deeply. So, recognizing historical and generational trauma for the Black community, especially in Canada, we know it's integral to have productive and intentional conversations. Do you have any suggestions for how these conversations can be approached in long-term care context?
Dialogue has always been a very important thing to me. So even if you can just get a group of people together to just sit in a place and have a dialogue, dialogue doesn't hurt anybody. What I found in the times that I had done these larger dialogues, like in the university or the colleges in the southern part of the United States, the dialogue and also the large dialogue that I was involved in here across Canada. And what I found is that this dialogue follows a certain pattern. Generally, what happens in the very beginning of the dialogue, people have a little bit of anger because they're not sure what this is about, and they still have some fear. But it moves from there. After that starts to die down, people start to tell stories, their personal stories. This is what happened to me, or I had a friend that this happened to, or this or that and the other. And now we're getting to know who they are. And it's actually being silent. It's almost like you're coming up on a hill like this, and then you hit this plateau and things calm down. Then you dip a little bit, and then you're coming back up again a little bit higher. And then after you've passed that part, then you start to hear people going, "Gee, I didn't know that. Thank you for that." And then at the end, everybody's hugging. So the dialogue is possible. It just needs to be moderated, not forced. Allow people to have the freedom to say whatever they want. In all of those things, even in the universities in the southern part of the United States, this is the second largest county in Florida, Broward County. And I never had anybody out of control. And that would be my thing. It really has more dialogue and asking questions. For me, also for my mother, what I did for her in long-term care was probably I didn't write the short story. I wrote a light biography of mother to let people know that, first of all, she can't be bathed by a man because she had been raped. You can't get water in her face or in her nose or in her thing because she got pushed off a bridge on her way to a segregated school. and it was only shallow water. There were certain things that I said you cannot have. Let her deal with her face with her own face cloth, and they didn't want to deal with that order as well. So there was I can't really speak directly of those stories anymore because it does cause trauma in me because of what I saw in her face and the fact that they completely ignored her history, who she was, how she grew up, that trauma that she carries, not just her own trauma, the ancestral trauma as well. So, I mean, she sat beside her father when she was 12 years old as he took his final breath. So, so that's what it comes down to. We have to be human beings. We have to be present. Not being present and trying to put a bandage on somebody's cut doesn't work. I mean, you have to really pay attention to that. And that's all you have to do with people as well. And we can all get along. It's really it it's almost like we want to stay in ignorance. Me, I get excited when I meet new people. I get excited when I hear some of the stories. I really do. And I've got millions of them that they're other people's stories, but they inspire me in so many different ways.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think you've raised a really great point that dialogue and questions are the only reason or the only way we'll really learn more about someone's experience. And I think the generational trauma that you've mentioned, as a care partner yourself, you have this ability to, share more about your mother, about your loved ones. And I think that goes to show that, the value of care partners, that they can advocate and say a lot of things that their loved one who may be a resident in long-term care just can't. And those conversations won't come easy. These are things that will take time and compassion and empathy to really discuss, but they're worth, asking these questions, figuring out how can we plan care a lot better and make sure that we're being intentional, cognizant of past experiences, and then, just creating a safe space. So I really appreciate that response. Building on that, and definitely want to showcase your contributions and big role with the FCO DIRAC, so the Diversity, Inclusion, and Equitable Representation Advisory Committee, which started all the way back in 2020. You were there for its inception, and we're so excited to still have you part. Just kind of looking at your experience and your advisory role on the DIRAC from your own perspective, how do we know when belonging is truly present in a long-term care home? And what can be done for Black residents and their families to know and to really feel that their experiences and their voices matter?
That's a great question because I had my mother there, and I'm going to just tell a very short story. The hardest thing in the world, the hardest thing for me was when I had to help my mom. We had to go to long-term care. There was no way that I can't be awake 24 hours a day, and I was on my own. Anyway, there was a number of different things. But my mother was also in pain. She had a number of different chronic conditions. And I remember when the lady that was coming over to assess, we were crisis listed. That's how bad it was. And my mom wasn't wasn't taken care of. When I got there, the condition I saw her in was shock in and of itself. People weren't taking care of her. Um, but I remember when I had the lady come in, and I had spent the previous 24 hours talking to Alzheimer's, talking to anybody I could about, am I doing the right thing? What should I do? And all the rest, because it was a really, really hard decision. And I remember the lady came in, she sat down, she started asking mom questions, and the woman asked her, well, how do you feel about this or whatever? She says, whatever my son says. I'll never forget that. Big smile on her face, happy joy, whatever my son says. And so we went into long-term care. I think that next day, as a matter of fact, because we had to be in there within 24 hours. And when I got there, so we got there around lunchtime. We filled out all these papers and all this stuff that was going on. Of course, safety was still big in my mind. Are they going to treat her? Um, and so we had lunch, we had dinner, we played some cards. Mom could play cards then when she could see the faces. And so once I was able to, get her ready for bed, and I was ready now to leave the facility. When I got to the door, the nurse turned and looked at me and said, we've never had a black person here before. And I thought to myself, I was calm and everything about it. I says, that's not a very welcoming statement, is it? So now with that, how am I supposed to, how are they going to take care of my mom? Now, I saw my mother every single day, did her afternoon care, and sometimes I would sneak in early in the morning, and sometimes I'd come late at night so I could see what was going on and things like that. So, um, but these are just kind of the what's the word I'm looking for? It's not even a for granted thing, but it was just a statement. It wasn't a question. It didn't require an answer. It was just like, what are you doing? I mean, what are you saying? What are you really remarking on? And then that fed other things. Like, for instance, they would still, even though I said don't have a man bathe the mum, they had a man do it. And then and I said about the face, because I came in one time, my mother was screaming, because of how they were treating her. And matter of fact, they're using that story as a training video at RVH for interns. Those things don't happen to somebody else. It doesn't just have to be my mother. It could be anybody. It could be somebody who they don't understand the language or whatever, and then they just have this thing. So, but that's an individual thing. That's a personal thing. Nobody else would have said anything like that to me, I don't think, because nobody ever did. It was just this one individual that said that. But what I also noticed was the staffing started to shift and we started to get more people. Matter of fact, we had nurses coming in who had come originally from the African continent, and then so they knew how to comb my mother's hair because I was doing her hair, and they knew all that, and it was like it was such a beautiful thing. But I guess it's to me it's always been about presence. If you're going to be there, be there. It's like when I came to visit my mom one day, she says to me, I just got home from school. And people used to always say to me, says, but how do you feel about your mother not knowing who you are? I says, she knows who I am. I said, just because she says she just came from school, you know what she's saying? She's feeling that I'm her father. Now, she loved that man to death. She sat by his side when she was 12 years old and he took his final breath. And I'm thinking, what great company is that? She knows who I am. So, you know, so, but yeah, when I saw that shift, mom also made a shift and the whole floor made a shift. It was amazing. It was amazing because everybody had care on their mind, unhyphenated care. The word care, oh wow. Yeah, I can't remember the definition now, but it's a 700-year-old word. So, but it's morphed and it's changed and become hyphenated in so many different ways. This is not rocket science, really. It's about being present. When you're as a care worker, if you're moving from one patient to the other, you're not thinking about what you're doing right now necessarily. You're thinking about what's next or what you may not have done before. So you're not thinking in the present, you're either in the future or you're in the past. And what you need to be is in the present. So, and that's what happens too when you have this dialogue with people and you go through these phases and stages. That's exactly the same thing.
I think it really does come from looking at this as a continuous journey. There's going to be big steps and small steps. It's something that is just ongoing. We are continuously learning, taking opportunities like that might not have been great in the moment, but learning from those opportunities and then teaching others best practices and care is such a fluid word, like you're saying, like there's so many things that are involved in care, but I think when we, take an approach of compassion, having that emotional intelligence, intention, devoting the time to be present for each resident that's there, in long-term care really helps with that connection. So thank
Yeah,
you so much.
it's all
Really,
about people. That's all it
yes.
is. And the I was working on some stuff now, and I'd come up with a different thing because when I was talking about belonging earlier, I remember, and then I brought up this idea of welcoming. So it's almost like we need to now think of it in that way that it's really just be kind. It's just welcome. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you. Just really, really simple things. I know the patient-facing workers have a tough time of it because they are thinking about the future. I wrote an article, opinion piece about it called "The Tyranny of the Urgent," and we need to just be able to kind of lay back a little bit. It's hard on them, but um, I was working on a whole nother care pattern with I can't remember the name of the place now, but they've just put it together now because we're trying to get a credential for um, PSWs and nurses and stuff in long-term care. So it's kind of shifting um, this idea about not thinking what's next or what's thinking what just passed, because they could never understand how I could get my mother dressed. And I'm thinking, well, but that's all I have to do. I'm not thinking about what's happening next or what's happening there. And I could still get her dressed faster than anybody else. And my mother would be laughing and giggling and doing her thing, you know. Because I mean, they go in there and they were ripping her stuff off of the bed, and then they'd try to rip her clothes off. I mean, and I got her the clothes that it's easy to get on and off. So you pay a little bit extra money so I can make it easier for them and for my mother. But they don't they how can I explain it? It's almost like they're invisible to what's happening because they're too busy thinking about what they have to do or what maybe they didn't do with the last person. So I'm not going to, it's not about fault. It's not what it's about. And it's not about time. It's about thinking differently, you know, and behavior, why you here. And just even a smile. I had this one girl, we decided that we were going to bring in some people from high school to help be with the seniors, and also arranged for a grade 3 class to come in to the home, which was one. I remember I was crying actually because I was hoping because my mom loves little kids, right? And so did the others in the home. And this one girl from the high school girl, she'd put her hands like this, just like the Dalai Lama. She'd have them like this and running for her face. And my mom would have this big, this big thing on her, you know. So there's all kinds of little things we do. This, like I say, they're not generally big things. You're just being kind, being present. You don't have to necessarily ask questions. You don't have to be loud. You can just be quiet, silent, whatever it is that you feel is happening. Just like I had said earlier that I think in my notes there that uh, belonging is a feeling, you know, and how do we get there? Well, my grandmother gave me those 4 words, and that was good enough for me. You know, you are the one. I still don't know what it means, but so,
And figure that out
yeah,
together.
yeah.
I think that it's a sign that we all have a part to play in figuring that out and just continuously building safe spaces. So thank you again, Donald, for being here, for
Thank you.
unapologetically sharing your story, your family story. It's such a rich history, and I hope anyone viewing this video really feels empowered to learn more about Black history, Black culture, to connect with others in the community. And I think as we close, I want to reflect on the key theme that emerged through your wonderful words, which is belonging and building that through intentionality. So it requires listening, accountability, culturally responsive care, and of course, a willingness to challenge systems that were not designed initially with Black communities in mind.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Black History Month calls on all of us to remember the past, but to act in the present. The responsibility to foster belonging in long-term care homes and our greater communities doesn't rest on only Black residents and their families or staff alone. That responsibility belongs to all of us. On behalf of Family Councils Ontario, thank you so much for listening.